The dust-covered stagecoach rattled to a halt outside the Hangtown saloon as Sarah Holloway clutched her worn leather satchel against her chest, her knuckles white with tension. California, 1869, a place and time that promised new beginnings, yet all Sarah carried with her were endings. The Gold Rush town, officially known as Placerville but still called Hangtown by locals who remembered its vigilante justice days, sprawled before her like an uncertain future she wasn't sure she wanted. "End of the line, madam," the stagecoach driver called as he climbed down to help with her trunk. Sarah stepped onto the street, the wooden boardwalk creaking beneath her boots. Her traveling dress, once fine but now wrinkled from the journey, hung from her slender frame. 3 days on the road from Sacramento had left her exhausted, but she had nowhere else to go after fleeing San Francisco with only what she could carry. She pushed a strand of auburn hair from her face and surveyed the dusty Main Street. Hangtown was smaller than she expected, but bustling with miners, merchants, and all manner of frontier folk. The air smelled of wood smoke, horses, and possibility, a scent that once would have thrilled her. Sarah paid the driver and asked where she might find lodging. "Widow Parker runs a boarding house just down the way," he said, pointing down the street. "Decent place for a lady alone." She thanked him and began the walk, aware of curious glances. A woman arriving alone in a frontier town always caused speculation. Sarah kept her eyes forward, refusing to acknowledge the stares. Let them wonder. Her story was her own. The boarding house stood 2 stories tall with a freshly painted sign. Sarah knocked and was greeted by a plump, gray-haired woman with kind eyes. "Mrs. Parker." "I need a room if you have one available." The woman assessed Sarah with a practiced eye. "Just yourself, dear?" "Yes, just me." Sarah shifted her satchel, her wedding ring conspicuously absent. $2 a week includes breakfast and supper, Mrs. Parker said. "I run a respectable house." "No gentlemen callers in the rooms." Sarah almost laughed at the irony. "That won't be a problem." Her room was small but clean, with a narrow bed, washstand, and window overlooking the street. Sarah sat on the edge of the bed, unpinned her hat, and finally allowed her shoulders to sag. Tears threatened, but she blinked them away. She had cried enough in recent months to last a lifetime. She unpacked her meager belongings: 3 dresses, undergarments, a brush, and her mother's locket. At the bottom of her satchel lay the letters that had shattered her world and the legal papers dissolving her 5-year marriage to Henry. She tucked them into the bottom drawer of the small dresser, out of sight, but never out of mind. After washing her face and changing her dress, Sarah ventured downstairs. She needed work, and quickly. Her savings would last a month, perhaps 2 if she was frugal. "Mrs. Parker, do you know of any respectable positions available in town? I can sew, keep books, and I've taught children." The older woman looked up from her knitting. "As a matter of fact, Mr. Davidson at the Mercantile mentioned needing help. His daughter used to mind the store, but she's married and moved to Sacramento." She studied Sarah. "You have a refined way about you. Where did you come from, if you don't mind my asking?" "San Francisco, most recently." Sarah offered no more, and Mrs. Parker was too polite to press. "Best see Mr. Davidson first thing tomorrow. Stores open at 8. Sarah nodded her thanks and retreated to her room, where she spent the evening staring at the ceiling, her thoughts chasing each other in familiar, painful circles. Henry's betrayal, the other woman, the humiliation that drove her from the city. And beneath it all, the crushing weight of her failure. Morning came too soon. Sarah dressed in her best remaining dress, navy blue cotton with white trim at the collar and cuffs. She twisted her hair into a simple knot and pinched her cheeks for color. First impressions mattered. Davidson's Mercantile occupied a prime spot on the Main Street. The bell jangled as Sarah entered, taking in the well-stocked shelves and polished counter. A balding man with spectacles looked up from his ledger. "Good morning," Sarah said. "Mrs. Parker mentioned you might be seeking help in the store." Mr. Davidson peered at her over his glasses. "Indeed I am. You staying at Martha's place?" "Yes, sir. I arrived yesterday. My name is Sarah Holloway." "Any experience in a mercantile, Mrs. Holloway?" Sarah hesitated. "It's Miss Holloway. And no, but I'm quick with figures and I learn fast." His eyebrows rose at her unmarried status, but he didn't comment. "Can you write a fair hand, keep accounts?" "I can. My father insisted I learn proper bookkeeping." "Wise man. When can you start?" Relief flooded through her. "Immediately. 8 till 6 half-day Saturday, Sundays off, $1.50 a day." Sarah nodded. It wasn't much, but it would keep her housed and fed. "Thank you, Mr. Davidson. I won't disappoint you." The work was straightforward enough, serving customers, stocking shelves, and keeping the ledger. By midday, Sarah had settled into a rhythm. The townspeople were curious but generally welcoming, especially once they learned she was working for Davidson, a respected businessman. As she was arranging a display of canned goods, the bell above the door jangled. Sarah turned to greet the customer and found herself looking up into the bluest eyes she'd ever seen. The man who entered was tall and broad-shouldered, his face weathered by sun and wind. He wore the practical clothes of a working cowboy: denim pants, a faded blue shirt, and a dust-covered hat he removed as he entered. "Afternoon," he said, his voice deep and resonant. Sarah nodded politely. "Good afternoon. Can I help you find something?" He studied her for a moment, clearly noticing she was new. "Just picking up an order for the Zimmerman ranch. Ethan Zimmerman." "I'll check with Mr. Davidson," Sarah said, moving toward the back room where her employer was inventorying new stock. "New in town?" the cowboy asked before she could step away. "Yes, just yesterday." She kept her tone professional, unwilling to invite personal questions. Mr. Davidson emerged before the conversation could continue. "Ethan, your order's ready. Got everything except the barbed wire. Should be on next week's freight wagon. Appreciate it, James." The cowboy Ethan turned his attention back to the merchandise, but Sarah felt his occasional glance as she continued working. When he approached the counter to pay, he spoke directly to her. "Welcome to Hangtown, Miss Holloway." "Sarah Holloway, thank you." He tipped his hat. "Ethan Zimmerman. My family's ranch is about 5 miles west of town." "Mr. Zimmerman," she acknowledged with a slight nod, keeping the counter between them like a shield. After he paid and gathered his supplies, he paused at the door. "Hope you find what you're looking for in Hangtown, Miss Holloway." The simple comment struck her as presumptuous. What did he know about what she was looking for? She managed a tight smile and returned to her work. That evening at the boarding house dining table, Mrs. Parker and the other 3 boarders, 2 elderly sisters and a young bank clerk, peppered Sarah with questions about her day. "I hear you met Ethan Zimmerman," Mrs. Parker said with a knowing smile. "Quite the eligible bachelor, that one." Sarah concentrated on her stew. "He came to pick up supplies. His family owns one of the largest cattle ranches in the county," Mrs. Parker continued. "Built it up from nothing after coming west in '49. His parents passed a few years back. Influenza took them both within a week of each other. He and his younger brother run it now." "How tragic," Sarah murmured, thinking of her own losses. "He's a good man," the landlady added. "Not like some of those rough types. Got an education back east before joining his family. Turned down plenty of local girls, though." "Mrs. Parker, I have no interest in Mr. Zimmerman's romantic history," Sarah said firmly. The woman had the grace to look abashed. "Of course, dear, just making conversation." Later in her room, Sarah wrote in her journal, a habit since childhood. First day in Hangtown. Found employment at the Mercantile. The work is simple but honest. The people seem kind if overly curious. A cowboy named Ethan Zimmerman came into the store today. Mrs. Parker thinks he's quite the catch. As if I would ever trust my heart to another man. Some lessons need only be learned once. Over the next 2 weeks, Sarah established a routine. She rose early, worked diligently at the Mercantile, took her meals at the boarding house, and spent evenings reading or sewing in her room. She rebuffed all attempts at friendship beyond polite conversation, preferring solitude to risking more pain. Ethan Zimmerman returned to the store several times, always pleasant, always watching her with those penetrating blue eyes. She maintained her professional demeanor despite his attempts at conversation. On a particularly busy Saturday, Sarah was managing the store alone while Mr. Davidson attended a town council meeting. The bell jangled continuously as townsfolk came to purchase their weekly supplies. By late afternoon, Sarah's feet ached and her patience was wearing thin. The bell rang again, and she looked up to see Ethan entering, this time accompanied by a younger man with the same strong jaw and confident bearing. "Miss Holloway," Ethan greeted her, removing his hat. "This is my brother Samuel." The younger Zimmerman tipped his hat. "Pleasure, madam. Ethan's mentioned you." Sarah raised an eyebrow at this information but said nothing beyond a polite greeting. "We need some supplies," Ethan continued, "and possibly your assistance with something else." "Oh." Sarah's tone was cautious. "Our housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, has been teaching the children at the ranch workers' kids and such. But she's returning to San Francisco to care for her ailing mother. Mr. Davidson mentioned you have experience teaching." Sarah hesitated. "I taught briefly, yes." "We're looking for someone to continue the lessons. 3 days a week, good pay. You'd be back in town by evening each day." The offer was unexpected. "I already have employment, Mr. Zimmerman. I've already spoken with Mr. Davidson. He's willing to adjust your schedule here." Sarah frowned, disliking that they had discussed her without her knowledge. "I appreciate the offer, but I prefer my current arrangement." Ethan studied her face. "It pays twice what you're making here for half the hours." The practical part of her recognized the opportunity. With such wages, she could save enough to eventually move on, perhaps to San Francisco or even back east. "I'll consider it," she finally said. "That's all I ask." He smiled, the expression transforming his weathered face. "Let me know by Monday." After they left, Sarah found herself distracted. Teaching again would be a welcome change from retail work, and the extra income would secure her future. But it would mean spending time with Ethan Zimmerman, a man who clearly stirred something in her she'd rather leave dormant. That evening, she sought Mrs. Parker's counsel. "The Zimmerman ranch is respectable," the older woman assured her. "Mrs. Chen lived in town here before going to work for them, never had a complaint, said they treated her like family. It's not the ranch's reputation I'm concerned about." Mrs. Parker's eyes softened. "You're running from something, aren't you, dear? Or someone?" Sarah looked away. "I came here for a fresh start." Sometimes fresh starts come in unexpected packages. The landlady patted her hand. "Think on it, but don't let fear make your decision for you." That night, Sarah tossed and turned. The practical advantages were clear, but her instincts screamed caution. Ethan Zimmerman made her uncomfortable not because he was improper, but because he seemed to see too much when he looked at her. By morning, pragmatism won out. Sarah would accept the position, but on her terms. She would maintain her professional distance and use the opportunity to secure her future. On Monday, she found Ethan waiting outside the Mercantile before opening. "Mr. Zimmerman," she acknowledged. "Miss Holloway." He fell into step beside her. "Have you considered my offer?" "I have." "I'll accept with conditions." His eyebrows rose. I'm listening. I'll teach 3 days a week as proposed. I'll arrive at 8 and leave by 4 to return to town. I expect to be treated with respect and professional distance at all times. A smile tugged at his lips. Of course. And I'll need my own transportation. I can't rely on others to bring me back to town. We have a buggy you can use. Samuel or I will show you the way the first time. Sarah nodded. When would you like me to start? Wednesday. That will give Mrs. Chen time to introduce you to the children and show you what they've been learning. Wednesday, she agreed, extending her hand to seal their arrangement. His hand engulfed hers, warm and calloused. Something flickered in his eyes as they shook curiosity, perhaps, or challenge. Sarah withdrew her hand quickly. Until Wednesday, then, she said, turning toward the mercantile door. Miss Holloway, he called after her. She paused without turning. Thank you. The children will be delighted. Wednesday arrived with clear skies and mild temperatures, perfect for the ride to the Zimmerman ranch. Sarah dressed carefully in a practical brown skirt and cream blouse, with sturdy boots for the dusty roads. She packed a small bag with teaching materials she'd gathered and extra pins for her hair. Ethan arrived at the boarding house precisely at 7:30, driving a well-maintained buggy pulled by 2 matching bay horses. Sarah noticed he'd taken extra care with his appearance, clean-shaven, hair trimmed, wearing a new-looking blue shirt that matched his eyes. Good morning, he greeted her, jumping down to help with her bag. Good morning, Mr. Zimmerman. Ethan, please. Mr. Zimmerman makes me look for my father. Sarah hesitated, then nodded. Ethan, then, but I prefer Miss Holloway. He helped her into the buggy, his hands respectfully at her elbows. As you wish. The journey to the ranch took about 40 minutes, during which Ethan pointed out landmarks and told her about the area's history. Despite herself, Sarah found him to be good company, knowledgeable without being condescending, and genuinely passionate about the land he called home. My father came here with nothing but dreams and determination, he explained as they crested a hill. He worked the gold mines at first, saved every speck he found, then bought his first 100 acres when others were giving up and heading home. You must be very proud of what he built, Sarah observed. I am. But it wasn't just him. My mother was equally important to our success. She kept the books, helped birth the calves, even defended the homestead with a shotgun when rustlers came calling one winter while father was away. Sarah smiled at the image. She sounds remarkable. She was. A shadow passed over his face, losing them both so suddenly. It nearly broke me. The raw emotion in his voice resonated with Sarah's own losses. Before she could respond, he gestured ahead. There it is. Zimmerman Ranch. The property spread before them was impressive by any standard. A large 2-story house of stone and timber dominated the scene, surrounded by barns, corrals, and outbuildings. In the distance, cattle grazed on green pastures, and horsemen moved among them. Smoke rose from several chimneys, and a garden flourished beside the house. It's beautiful, Sarah said honestly. Ethan beamed with pride. Home. They pulled up to the house, where a Chinese woman in her 50s waited on the porch. 3 children played in the yard, 2 boys of about 8 and 10 and a girl who looked around 6. Mrs. Chen, Ethan called as he helped Sarah down. This is Miss Holloway. The woman bowed slightly. Welcome, Miss Holloway. Children are excited to meet their new teacher. The children gathered around, eyeing Sarah curiously. She recognized the wariness of young people who had already experienced adults coming and going from their lives. This is Miguel, son of our foreman, Ethan introduced the older boy. Thomas, whose father manages our horses, and Lily, daughter of our cook. Sarah smiled warmly at each child. I'm very pleased to meet you all. Mrs. Chen led them to a small building behind the main house that had been converted into a schoolroom. It was well equipped with desks, a blackboard, maps, and shelves of books. "We have more children sometimes," she explained. "Ranch hands children when they hear, but always these three." Sarah spent the morning observing Mrs. Chen's teaching methods and getting to know the children's abilities. Miguel was strong in mathematics but struggled with reading. Thomas was the opposite, while little Lily showed promise in both areas but was easily distracted. At midday, they broke for lunch in the main house. Sarah met more of the ranch staff, including Samuel's wife Maria, a beautiful Mexican woman who managed the household with quiet efficiency. The dining room was busy and informal, with workers and family eating together, a stark contrast to the rigid social hierarchies Sarah had known in San Francisco. After lunch, Mrs. Chen left Sarah alone with the children to conduct her first lesson. She chose a simple story that required each child to read aloud in turn, then asked questions that played to their different strengths. By the time the lesson ended at 3, Sarah felt a connection forming with these eager young minds. As promised, Ethan had the buggy ready for her return to town. "How did it go?" he asked as they set off. "Very well, I think. You have wonderful children here." "Not mine by birth, but mine to look after," he said. "Their parents work hard. Least I can do is make sure their children get an education." Sarah glanced at him. "That's unusually progressive thinking, Mr. Ethan," he shrugged. "My father believed every person deserves a chance to better themselves. I was lucky enough to attend school in Boston. Why shouldn't these children have similar opportunities?" Indeed. Sarah found herself reevaluating her initial impressions of him. The ride back to town passed quickly. At the boarding house, Ethan helped her down from the buggy, his hands lingering a moment longer than necessary. "Same time Friday?" he asked. "Yes, that would be fine." Sarah gathered her skirts to climb the steps. "Miss Holloway," she turned back. "Thank you. The children already like you." Sarah nodded, oddly touched by the simple praise. Over the next 2 weeks, Sarah settled into her new routine. Mondays and Thursdays at the Mercantile, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Fridays teaching at the ranch. The arrangement suited her well, providing both the solitude she craved and the satisfaction of meaningful work. The children progressed under her guidance, and she found herself looking forward to their lessons. Even more surprising, she began to anticipate the rides to and from the ranch with Ethan. Despite her initial reservations, his company was pleasant. He respected her boundaries, never prying into her past, yet shared stories of his own life openly. One Friday, as they were returning to town, a sudden thunderstorm caught them halfway. Rain poured down, soaking them both despite Ethan's efforts to hurry the horses. "There's an old line shack just ahead," he shouted over the downpour. "We can wait it out there." The small cabin was basic but sound, with a fireplace and simple furnishings. Ethan quickly built a fire while Sarah wrung water from her skirts. "I'm sorry about this," he said, handing her a rough blanket. "These spring storms usually pass quickly." Sarah wrapped the blanket around her shoulders, acutely aware of being alone with him in such close quarters. "It's no one's fault." Ethan removed his wet coat and hung it near the fire. "Still, I know you value your reputation. I promise we'll return to town as soon as it's safe." She nodded, touched by his consideration. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the rain pound on the roof and the fire crackle in the grate. "May I ask you something, Miss Holloway?" Ethan finally said. Sarah tensed. "You may ask, I may not answer." "Fair enough." He studied the flames. "What brought you to Hangtown? A woman with your education and refinement, there must have been other options." She considered deflecting, as she had with everyone else who asked. Instead, she found herself answering honestly. I needed to go somewhere no one knew me, somewhere I could start over. Ethan nodded, not pushing for more. I understand that need. Do you? After my parents died, I nearly sold the ranch, couldn't bear to be surrounded by memories of them. He poked at the fire. Went on a 3-month bender in San Francisco. Samuel finally tracked me down, dragged me home, and sobered me up. The admission surprised her. What changed? Why did you stay? Realized running away wouldn't heal anything. The pain would follow me wherever I went. He looked at her directly. Sometimes you have to face what hurts you before you can move past it. The words hit too close to home. Sarah looked away. Sometimes the hurt is too great. Maybe. His voice softened. Or maybe you just haven't found the right remedy. The air between them seemed to thicken. Sarah stood abruptly. The rain is letting up. We should go. Ethan didn't press. He gathered their things and readied the buggy. By the time they reached town, the storm had passed completely, leaving puddles and a fresh, clean scent in the air. At the boarding house steps, Sarah paused. Thank you for your discretion today. Always, Miss Holloway. He tipped his hat. See you next week. That night, Sarah added a new entry to her journal. I find myself confused by my feelings toward Ethan Zimmerman. He is kind, intelligent, and honorable, everything Henry pretended to be but wasn't. Yet how can I trust my judgment again? The heart is treacherous. Mine led me astray once before. I cannot risk such pain again. May turned to June, and with the changing season came subtle shifts in Sarah's carefully constructed walls. She began accepting invitations to Sunday dinners at the Parkers. She joined the Ladies' Aid Society that met weekly to sew for the poor. And when Ethan invited her to stay for the ranch's Independence Day celebration, she surprised herself by accepting. The 4th of July dawned bright and hot. Sarah wore her one remaining fine dress, a pale blue cotton with white lace trim, and pinned her hair in a more elaborate style than usual. She told herself it was for the special occasion, not for any particular person's appreciation. The ranch was transformed for the celebration. Red, white, and blue bunting decorated the house and barns. Tables laden with food stretched across the yard. A small band of ranch hands with fiddles and harmonicas provided music, and children ran everywhere, their excitement palpable. Ethan found her moments after she arrived, his face lighting up at the sight of her. You came. I said I would. Sarah smiled despite herself. Everything looks wonderful. Wait until you taste Maria's barbecue. He offered his arm. Come, let me introduce you to everyone properly. The day passed in a blur of festivities, games for the children, a shooting competition, which Samuel won by a narrow margin, and dancing on a wooden platform constructed for the occasion. Sarah found herself laughing more than she had in months, especially when the children insisted she join their 3-legged race. As evening approached, Ethan sought her out again. Come with me. There's something I'd like to show you. Curious, Sarah followed him away from the celebration, up a gentle hill behind the house. At the top stood an ancient oak tree, its massive branches spreading in all directions. My thinking spot, Ethan explained. Best view on the property. Indeed, the vista was spectacular, rolling hills, the ranch buildings nestled in the valley, and in the distance, the faint outline of mountains. It's breathtaking, Sarah admitted. Ethan sat on a flat rock beneath the tree, patting the space beside him. After a moment's hesitation, Sarah joined him. I've watched you these past weeks, he said quietly. You're beginning to let people in bit by bit. Sarah stiffened. I don't know what you mean. When you first came to town, you were like a fortress, walls up, drawbridge raised. His eyes were gentle. Now there are chinks in the armor, you smile more, you let the children hug you, you stayed for this celebration. Perhaps I'm just becoming accustomed to my new surroundings. Perhaps, he didn't sound convinced, or perhaps you're healing. The words struck a nerve. Some wounds don't heal, Mr. Zimmerman. Ethan, he corrected softly, and I disagree. All wounds heal given time and proper care. Sarah shook her head, feeling the familiar tightness in her chest. You don't understand. Then help me understand. His hand moved to cover hers, warm and steady. What happened to you, Sarah? The use of her given name, spoken with such tenderness, cracked something inside her. Words she had kept bottled up for months suddenly poured out. I was married. 5 years to a man I believed loved me completely. Her voice caught. Henry was charming, successful, everything a woman is taught to want in a husband. I thought we were happy. Ethan remained silent, his hand still covering hers. Last Christmas I found letters, dozens of them, hidden in his desk. The humiliation still burned. He had a mistress, had for years, a woman in Sacramento with whom he had a child, a 3-year-old son. She couldn't look at Ethan as she continued. When I confronted him, he didn't even deny it. Said he'd married me for my family's connections, but that she was his true love. That he stayed with me because divorce would damage his reputation, but his heart belonged to her. Sarah's voice hardened. I filed for divorce the next day. My family begged me to reconsider, to think of the scandal, to give him another chance. As if I were the one who had done something wrong. She finally met Ethan's gaze. So I left, abandoned everything I knew rather than live a lie or endure their judgment. My heart was broken beyond repair, she whispered, the words catching in her throat. Ethan was quiet for a long moment, his expression unreadable in the fading light. Then he took her hand and placed it gently against his chest. Through his shirt she could feel the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. Let me show you mine still works, he said softly. Despite loss, despite pain, it still works, Sarah, and so does yours. The simple gesture and words undid her. Tears she had refused to shed for months finally fell. Ethan drew her gently into his arms, holding her as she wept for her lost marriage, for her shattered trust, for the woman she had been before disillusionment changed her. When the tears subsided, she remained in his embrace, surprised by how safe she felt. I don't expect anything from you, Ethan murmured against her hair. Just know that when you're ready, if you're ever ready, there's a heart here waiting for you, one that would cherish yours properly. In the distance, fireworks began to bloom against the darkening sky, casting brief, colorful light over them. Sarah lifted her face, meeting Ethan's gaze. I'm afraid, she admitted. I know. His thumb brushed a tear from her cheek. Fear is the shadow cast by past pain. But shadows fade in the light. She found herself smiling at his poetic words. Where did a cowboy learn to speak like that? My mother loved poetry. Read Emerson and Whitman to us on winter evenings. His eyes crinkled. Some of it stuck. The fireworks continued, and they watched in comfortable silence, Sarah still within the circle of his arms. Something had shifted between them, a door cracked open that Sarah had believed permanently sealed. As July melted into August, the changes in Sarah became more noticeable. She wore her hair looser. She hummed as she worked in the mercantile. She began taking Sunday rides with Ethan, chaperoned by Samuel and Maria at first, then alone as the townspeople grew accustomed to seeing them together. Sarah still maintained her boundaries. She refused his invitations to dinner alone, and always ensured they parted at the boarding house steps, but her heart was undeniably thawing. Ethan was patient, never pushing for more than she was ready to give. On a sweltering August afternoon, Sarah was teaching the children outdoors beneath a large elm tree when Ethan galloped into the yard, his horse lathered with sweat. Fire, he shouted to the ranch hands. "North pasture. Get the water wagon." Sarah gathered the children, ushering them toward the house. "Stay with Mrs. Rodriguez," she instructed, referring to the cook. "I'm going to help." "Miss Holloway, no," Miguel protested. "Fire is dangerous, which is why they need every hand," she replied firmly. "Do as I say." She hurried to where ranch hands were loading equipment onto wagons. Without waiting to be asked, she began filling canteens with water and loading them into a crate. Samuel noticed her. "Miss Holloway, this isn't women's work." "Nonsense. I have 2 hands and common sense." She continued her task. "The men will need water to drink if they're fighting fire in this heat." Samuel glanced at Ethan, who gave a quick nod. "Fine, but you stay with the water wagon. Don't go near the flames." Sarah rode out with the second wagon, crammed alongside ranch hands armed with shovels and wet blankets. The north pasture came into view, a wall of flame advancing through the dry grass toward valuable grazing land. The men formed a line, digging a firebreak while others beat at flames with wet sacks. Sarah organized the water distribution, ensuring each man had a chance to drink and cool off before returning to the fire line. When she spotted Ethan at the front line, shirt soaked with sweat, face blackened with soot, she filled a fresh canteen and made her way to him. "Drink," she ordered, pressing the water into his hands. He looked startled, then angry. "I told Samuel to keep you back, and I chose to come forward." She held his gaze. "Drink, Ethan. You're no use to anyone if you collapse from heat exhaustion." He drank deeply, his eyes never leaving hers. "Stubborn woman." "Yes, now go back to being a stubborn man. Stop that fire." A smile flickered across his tired face. "Yes, madam." The battle against the flames continued for hours. At one point, the wind shifted, driving the fire toward the firefighters. In the chaos of retreat, Sarah noticed young Thomas, the horse manager's son, who had snuck out to join the effort, trapped between 2 advancing flame fronts. Without hesitation, she ran toward him, ignoring the shouts behind her. The boy was frozen in fear, watching the flames approach. "Thomas," she called. "Come to me, now." The boy looked up, saw her, and began running. Sarah met him halfway, grabbing his hand and turning to escape, only to find their path blocked by a new tongue of flame. "This way." She pulled him toward a rocky outcrop where the grass was thinner. The heat was intense, smoke burning her lungs as they ran. They reached the rocks just as the flames caught the hem of her skirt. Sarah pushed Thomas up onto the rocks, then beat at her skirt with her hands, crying out as the flames seared her palms. Suddenly, Ethan was there, wrapping her in a wet blanket, smothering the fire. "Sarah, God Almighty, woman." His voice shook with fear and anger as he lifted her into his arms. "Thomas," she gasped. He's fine. Samuel has him." Ethan carried her back toward the wagons, his arms tight around her. "What were you thinking?" "That a child was in danger," she replied, wincing as the pain in her hands intensified. At the wagon, Maria was waiting with bandages and salve. She tended to Sarah's burned hands while Ethan hovered anxiously. "Not so bad," Maria pronounced. "We'll heal. No scars if you keep clean." The fire was finally contained by evening, having burned nearly 50 acres but spared the best grazing land. The exhausted firefighters returned to the ranch, where a meal awaited them. Sarah sat on the porch, her bandaged hands resting in her lap, watching the men eat. Ethan, cleaned up now but still bearing the exhaustion of the day, brought her a plate. "You need to eat," he said, sitting beside her. "I'm not sure I can manage with these." She indicated her bandaged hands. Without a word, Ethan cut a piece of meat and held it to her lips. Sarah hesitated, then opened her mouth, allowing him to feed her. The intimacy of the gesture sent warmth through her that had nothing to do with the fire's aftermath. They continued in silence, Ethan alternating between feeding himself and her, until the plate was empty. "Thank you," she said softly, "for the meal and for saving me from my own recklessness. Don't ever scare me like that again." His voice was rough with emotion. "When I saw you surrounded by flames, I thought my heart would stop." Sarah looked at him, really looked at him, the sincerity in his eyes, the worry etched in the lines of his face, the tenderness in his hands as he'd fed her. "You really do care for me, don't you?" she asked, wonder in her voice. "Sarah Holloway, I love you." The words were simple, direct. "I have since the day you stood in Davidson's store and looked at me like I was interrupting your day." A laugh escaped her. "I did, didn't I?" "You did. Proud and wounded and beautiful." His hand found hers, careful of the burns. "I knew then I wanted to know your story. To be part of it if you'd let me." Sarah looked down at their joined hands. "I'm still afraid, Ethan." "I know, but are you afraid of me or of being hurt again?" The question hung between them as twilight deepened around the porch. "Not of you," she finally answered. "Never of you." Ethan's smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. "Then we have somewhere to start." He leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished. Sarah remained still, her heart pounding as his lips met hers in a gentle, questioning kiss. After a moment's hesitation, she returned it, her bandaged hands coming up to rest lightly on his shoulders. When they parted, both were breathing quickly. "I should take you back to town," Ethan said, though he made no move to stand. "Yes," Sarah agreed, equally motionless. Eventually, they did return to Hangtown, the ride quiet but comfortable, filled with new awareness and possibility. At the boarding house steps, Ethan helped her down carefully, mindful of her injuries. "I'll come check on you tomorrow," he promised. Sarah nodded. "I'd like that." Before she could turn away, he caught her wrist gently. "Sarah, thank you for saving Thomas. It was reckless and terrifying and the bravest thing I've ever seen. I couldn't let him be hurt. The truth was simple. That's why I love you." Ethan kissed her forehead and stepped back. "Good night, Sarah." "Good night, Ethan." That night, despite her painful hands, Sarah wrote in her journal, "I am falling in love with Ethan Zimmerman. The realization terrifies and exhilarates me in equal measure. Is it possible to trust again, to believe in love after such betrayal? My head counsels caution, but my heart, my supposedly irreparable heart, seems to have ideas of its own." September brought cooler temperatures and changing leaves. Sarah's hands healed completely, as Maria had predicted. Her heart continued its own healing process, gradually opening to the possibility of a future she hadn't dared imagine. Ethan courted her properly Sunday drives, dinners with Samuel and Maria, small gifts that showed his thoughtfulness rather than extravagance. A book of poetry she had mentioned enjoying, a shell comb for her hair that he'd ordered specially from San Francisco, a small wooden box he'd carved himself during evening hours, decorated with wildflowers like those that grew on the hillside where they'd first shared confidences. Sarah found herself looking forward to each moment with him, her defenses lowering incrementally with each demonstration of his steady, reliable character. One crisp October afternoon, Ethan arrived at the schoolroom as Sarah was dismissing the children. "I have a surprise," he announced once the children had scattered. "Can you stay a bit longer today?" Curious, Sarah agreed. Ethan led her to the stables, where a horse she didn't recognize stood saddled, a beautiful chestnut mare with a white blaze. "This is Penny," Ethan said, stroking the horse's neck. "She's gentle but spirited, perfect for an intermediate rider." Sarah approached the mare cautiously. "She's lovely. Is she new to the ranch?" "She's yours." Ethan watched Sarah's face closely. "If you want her, mine." Sarah's hand paused mid-air. "Ethan, I can't accept such an expensive gift." "You can if you'll be spending more time at the ranch." He stepped closer. Sarah, I want to court you properly. Not just Sunday drives and chaperone dinners, but real courtship with a future in mind. Her heart raced. What kind of future? The kind where you don't return to town each night. The kind with rings and promises and forever. His eyes held hers. Not yet. Not until you're ready. But that's the direction I'm heading, and I want you to know it. Sarah stroked the mare's soft nose, using the moment to gather her thoughts. And the horse is practical. The children love having you here, I thought. Maybe you could stay overnight sometimes. Teach 2 days in a row, get to know the place better. He hesitated. Get to know me better. The offer touched her deeply. It wasn't just the gift of the horse, it was the gift of time, of space to make her decision without pressure. Thank you, she said simply, for Penny, and for understanding that I need time. Ethan's smile was like sunshine. We have all the time in the world, Sarah. That evening, instead of returning to town, Sarah stayed for dinner at the ranch house. Maria had prepared a special meal, and afterward, they all gathered in the parlor. Samuel played the piano while his wife sang old Spanish songs. The children performed a skit they'd been practicing in secret. And through it all, Ethan sat beside Sarah on the sofa, not touching her but present in a way that felt both exciting and comfortable. As October turned to November, Sarah began spending 2 or 3 nights a week at the ranch, sleeping in a guest room in the main house. Mrs. Parker raised her eyebrows but made no comment beyond. About time that man found himself a proper wife. The children flourished under Sarah's expanded teaching schedule. She introduced new subjects: natural science, drawing, even basic Latin for Miguel, who showed a particular aptitude for languages. More importantly, Sarah herself flourished. The pain of her past remained, but it no longer defined her. She laughed freely, spoke her mind, and allowed herself to dream of possibilities beyond mere survival. One evening in late November, Sarah and Ethan rode out together, Penny keeping easy pace with Ethan's stallion. The air was crisp, the setting sun painting the landscape in gold and amber. They reached the old oak on the hill, their special place, and dismounted. Ethan spread a blanket beneath the tree and produced a small basket. Dinner with a view. They ate cold chicken, bread, and apple tarts as the stars began to appear above them. Sarah found herself studying Ethan's profile in the gathering darkness: the strong jaw, the slight crook in his nose from being broken in his youth, the laugh lines around his eyes. "What are you thinking?" he asked, catching her gaze. "That I'm happy," she replied honestly. "Truly happy in a way I didn't think possible again." Ethan's expression softened. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small object, keeping it concealed in his palm. "I've been carrying this for weeks, waiting for the right moment." His voice was husky. "I think it might be now." Sarah's breath caught as he opened his hand, revealing a simple gold ring with a small diamond. "It was my mother's," he explained. "Not fancy, but given with more love than all the jewels in San Francisco." He took her hand, his eyes never leaving hers. "Sarah Holloway, I love you. Every stubborn, brave, beautiful part of you. Will you marry me?" Sarah looked at the ring, at Ethan, at the life he was offering. A life of honesty and partnership, of respect and genuine affection. Everything her first marriage had pretended to be but wasn't. "Your heart may have been broken," Ethan continued softly, "but it healed stronger than before. Strong enough, I hope, to take a chance on mine." Sarah placed her hand against his chest, feeling the steady, strong beat beneath her palm just as she had that night under the fireworks. "Yes," she whispered, certainty filling her. "Yes, Ethan Zimmerman, I will marry you." His smile was radiant as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if always meant to be there. When he kissed her, Sarah felt the last fragments of her old defenses melt away. They were married on Christmas Eve in the small church in Hangtown. The building overflowed with people, the entire ranch staff, townspeople who had come to know and respect Sarah, even Mr. Davidson, who gave the bride away with tears in his eyes. Sarah wore a new dress of ivory satin, ordered from Sacramento. Ethan looked handsome and slightly overwhelmed in his best black suit. The children participated in the ceremony, Lily as flower girl, Miguel and Thomas carrying the rings. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Ethan kissed her with such tenderness that several women in the congregation dabbed at their eyes. The reception was held at the ranch, the house decorated with evergreens and candles. There was dancing and feasting that lasted well into the night. When the last guests had departed or settled into spare rooms, Ethan led Sarah to the master bedroom, now their bedroom. "Welcome home, Mrs. Zimmerman," he said softly, closing the door behind them. "Home," Sarah repeated, tasting the word. "I like the sound of that." As winter melted into spring, Sarah settled fully into her new life. She continued teaching the children, but also took on more responsibilities at the ranch, keeping the accounts as Ethan's mother had done, starting a kitchen garden, even learning to assist with calving under Samuel's patient guidance. The nightmares that had plagued her since her divorce gradually faded. In their place came new dreams of children of their own someday, of growing old together beneath the oak tree on the hill, of building something lasting and true. One evening in April, Sarah found Ethan on the porch, staring at a letter with an unreadable expression. "What is it?" she asked, sitting beside him. He handed her the letter silently. It was from San Francisco, from Henry, her ex-husband. He had heard of her remarriage and wished to express his sincere regrets for past misunderstandings and his hope that she had found happiness. Sarah read it twice, then deliberately tore it into small pieces, letting the spring breeze carry them away. "Misunderstandings," she said with a disbelieving laugh, as if years of lies were merely a failure to communicate properly. Ethan watched her carefully. "Are you all right?" "Perfectly." She took his hand, twining her fingers with his. "Do you know what I felt when I read his name?" "Nothing." No pain, no anger, just nothing. Relief washed over his face. "I worried it might open old wounds." "The wounds are healed, my love." She leaned against his shoulder. "You were right that night under the oak tree. You showed me that hearts can mend, can work again, can love again, even better than before." Ethan wrapped his arm around her, pulling her close against the evening chill. "I'm glad I found you, Sarah Zimmerman." "As am I," she smiled up at him, "though technically I found you. You were just a customer interrupting my workday, remember?" His laugh rumbled through his chest. "Is that how you remember it?" "It's how it happened." She kissed him lightly. "But I prefer how the story continued." "And how does it continue from here?" he asked, his eyes warm with promise. Sarah placed his hand gently on her stomach. "With a new chapter, I think, in about 7 months." Ethan's expression transformed from confusion to wonder. "Sarah, are you saying yes?" Her smile was radiant. "We're having a baby." With a whoop of joy that startled the horses in the nearby corral, Ethan lifted her off her feet, spinning her in a circle before setting her gently back down. "Easy," she laughed. "Precious cargo. The most precious." He knelt before her, pressing his lips to her still flat abdomen. "Hello in there, little one. Your papa can't wait to meet you." 5 years later, the Zimmerman ranch flourished. The original house had been expanded to accommodate a growing family, twin boys, Ethan, Jr. and James, now 4 years old, and 2-year-old daughter Grace, named for Sarah's mother. The schoolroom had become a proper school, with Sarah hiring an additional teacher to help with the increased number of students, not just ranch children now, but those from neighboring properties as well. Ethan had expanded the ranch holdings, experimenting with new breeding techniques and modern farming methods he read about in agricultural journals. Samuel and Maria had built their own house on the property and added 2 children to the family mix. On a warm June evening, Sarah sat on the porch swing, watching her children play with their cousins in the yard. Ethan joined her, settling beside her with a contented sigh. "Good day," she asked, leaning into his embrace. "The best kind. Healthy cattle, happy children, beautiful wife." He kissed the top of her head. "What more could a man want?" Sarah smiled, her hand finding his as naturally as breathing. "Do you remember what you said to me that night by the campfire when we got caught in the storm?" "I said many things, most of them attempts to impress you." She laughed. "You said that my heart wasn't beyond repair, that I just hadn't found the right remedy." "Ah, that." His fingers traced lazy patterns on her arm. "Turned out I was right. You were." She turned to face him. "You know what the remedy was, not time like everyone says. It was your patience, your honesty, your unwavering belief that love was worth risking pain for." Ethan's eyes softened. "Love is always worth the risk, Sarah." From the yard came shrieks of laughter as little Grace chased a butterfly, her brothers close behind. The setting sun bathed everything in golden light, the house, the land, the family they had built together. "Yes," Sarah agreed, her heart full. "Always worth it." In the distance, the old oak tree stood sentinel on the hillside, witness to their beginning and the promise of their future. Sarah thought of the broken-hearted woman who had stepped off that stagecoach in Hangtown years ago, never imagining the joy that awaited her. "My heart works perfectly now," she whispered to her husband. "Because of you." Ethan's answer was a kiss that held all the tenderness, passion, and promise that had healed her, a kiss that told her their story was still only beginning.